subject of death and dying can be a very difficult conversation to have. Many of us avoid having the conversation because it makes us uncomfortable. We don't want to worry or upset our loved ones, and we really don't want to face tough questions or think about our own death. Having open conversations about death and dying allows us to prepare ourselves and our loved ones on how we would like to create our own end-of-life journey. On every episode of Guided Crossings, we will explore a different part of the dying process and offer suggestions on how to prepare your loved ones as well as yourself. I'm your host, Andrea Sebastyan, and this is Guided Crossings.
Over 30% of adults 55 and older are aging alone. While many people still have a partner, a large number are childless or far from their children. Solo aging doesn't necessarily mean single, and solo living doesn't have to mean loneliness or isolation. Today on Guided Crossings, I'm pleased to welcome Cathleen Toomey, who hosts a wonderful podcast called Seniority Authority and has had many discussions on solo aging. Kathleen, I'm so happy that you're here with us today. I can't tell you, I'm so excited.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you so much, Andrea. This is a wonderful format.
Great, good. I wanted to talk first about your podcast. How did that all come about?
It came about because of a cocktail party.
Okay.
So I live in Exeter, New Hampshire, where I've lived for 20 years. It's a small town. And I've worked for Riverwoods, which is an independent retirement community, a CCRC, for the last 15 or so years. So people know that I work at Riverwoods with older adults. And pre-COVID, people started coming up to me and saying, hey, I have a question. I think my dad has the beginnings of dementia, but I don't know if it's real or if it's a serious problem or if it's something normal. And they would say, my mom needs assisted living. What's assisted living? And how do I know it's a good place? And I realized that if my contemporaries were coming to me with all of these questions, then a lot of other people have the same questions because I don't have that many friends.
I'm pretty sure that's not true.
But I live in a small town. So I thought, I'm going to find the answers to these questions and amplify them and reach out to this larger group of boomers plus people that are suddenly having to face these questions about growing older that we've never had to face before, and they want to find an answer. So I have the ability to tap into a lot of smart people because I've been in the aging industry for over 15 years and I have the experts. So I am just that annoying person that tracks down experts because I am so passionate about people understanding what their future is going to look like.
Well, and I've listened to several of your podcasts and you actually really do that. It's not doom and gloom. Every single guest that you have on there that I've listened to has such a passion for what they're talking about. And, it's sort of, I don't know, I think knowledge is power. So the more you educate yourself on what potentially your older years can look like, the better off you are. And I think that, I think you're so lucky that you're able to tap in, like you said, to so many experts.
Well, I'm grateful for the opportunity to do this because the goal of Seniority Authority is to change the way people think about aging. It is really to start this revolution. Our society has such hang-ups about aging, and they really don't give us enough credit. And as boomers, we're used to revolutionizing things and we're used to changing things, and it's time to do that. It's time to start redefining how we think about aging. And as you said, get some knowledge about what our future looks like. We statistically are going to live longer than our parents or grandparents. So our parents didn't expect that they would live this long.
Right.
We know we're going to live this long, so let's get prepared about it. And the one thing that I think is kind of interesting is that people that have planned successfully their whole lives to buy a house, get married, educate their kids. They stop planning when it comes to retirement. Financially, they'll plan. But in terms of what am I going to do? How am I going to find purpose? How am I going to envision my future? They stick their heads in the sand and they're doing themselves an injustice.
Well, and that's why I think the podcast that you do is so helpful because, as we were talking earlier, I've listened to a couple and, there's always like someone saying, oh, I didn't really expect to have to take care of my mother, but now that I did, I wouldn't have traded those experiences for anything. And I just think that, more people need to hear that sort of thing because I don't know, like you said, you just bury your head in the sand or I'm not going to live that long. And then all of a sudden you're living that long and you're like, oops, now what? And I always look at it like, growing old isn't for the, weak. I think there's a lot of things that aren't great about it, but I actually feel very privileged that I'm still doing that. And I think that a lot of people are the same way, know? So
I think that growing older is a gift that not everyone gets to unwrap.
I'm the same way.
If you're not growing older, you've already passed away. So, and you're the expert at talking about uncomfortable topics when you talk about death and dying. It's the same thing about growing older. People don't want to acknowledge their age because they're older, because society has all these limitations and expectations put on this. Instead, I think we should admit our age and say, this is what I'm doing at 64, at 72, at 85, at 91. At Riverwoods, we have this wonderful woman who's 92 who just won the pickleball championship. And so, but let's own that.
Right.
And let's not let society's expectations minimize our dreams. So be grateful. I know it's not easy.
Oh, no.
It's, we all need more maintenance. Like our car needs more maintenance if it's 120,000 miles versus 10,000 miles. But we're still here. We still can do more than we expect if we change our attitudes. And I think with the podcast, with every episode, I try to break it down so that every episode, the listeners have one or two practical things they can do. So I thank you for recognizing I want to bring a positive spin on aging, and I also want it to be something that every single person has access to figuring out how they can live differently and improve their future.
That's well said. That's good. And I think you nail it. I mean, like I said, talking about one of the reasons why I wanted you on the show was the solo aging. And I don't think people understand what solo aging actually is. And so when I was kind of researching doing this, I was sort of like, just because you could have had a group of kids, you may not live near your children.
Right.
And so how do you, combat that sort of situation? Or, they might live somewhere you have no desire to live. And, why do you have to give up your entire life for what you're comfortable with because your children aren't living close to you? So, that's a big part of, I think, why people just sort of go through the motions. And like my dad, he's 90. And I keep saying to him, Dad, you should really think about where you want to go because he's still in his own house. He still, does everything. And I'm like, I'm really grateful that you can do that. But there's going to come a day where I'm going to have to decide where you want to be.
Right.
And I would rather you make that decision when you're capable of doing that.
Exactly. So that is the thing. If you don't plan ahead, somebody else may have to make those decisions for you. And there is an increase in solo agers because as boomers, there's a higher rate of divorce, higher rate of people who never married, higher rate of people who married but didn't have children. And there's always, the death of a spouse, which leaves you as a solo ager. The challenge with being a solo ager is that one of the epidemics in our country is loneliness. And it doesn't mean that being alone equates to loneliness, but if you are alone, you have to work harder at cultivating those friendships, those connections, and those are really important in terms of your ability to age healthfully. And as a solo ager, you really do have to get your plan together because you don't want those decisions to end up with a niece or a estranged child or whatever that is.
And I think that's the other side of it too that always makes me laugh, because I talk a lot about death and dying and getting your, your wishes in order and all that sort of stuff. And to me, I'm like, it's never has to be absolute. You're allowed to change.
Oh, yeah.
And I think people are like, well, if I have that conversation, then I'm done. And it's like, no. I mean, the recommendation is when you check your fire alarms on the 1st of January or whatever, go back and check your plan, because things could have changed through your years of, of what you had wanted. And then something changes and you're like, oh, okay, maybe that is a good idea. So, and you're allowed to change your mind.
You absolutely are. And the more you talk about it, the more you bring it in as part of a normal conversation. And for those people who are listening who are like, how do I bring this up? One thing that experts, I interviewed a really smart guy from the Mayo Clinic who has years of experience talking to families about this. He wrote a book called Mom, Dad, Can We Talk? His name is Dick Edwards. He says, find a natural time. If you're attending somebody else's funeral or somebody else's wake and, you bring your parent back or you bring your friend or your spouse, and you're like, oh, can you imagine? Open casket? I would never want that. That's a time to say, okay, well, what would you want? Did you like that service? Well, how would you want to be memorialized? How do you want to be thought of? And the farther away you do it, the easier it is to do. It's easier at 50 or 60 than it is at 90 or 80.
Right.
So start thinking, making it a part of the natural conversation. And it's not a one and done, as you said. It's not a one conversation and then you're it. You could rethink it. You could meet some friends who are doing things differently and change your mind.
Well, and I also think too, you always look at it, unfortunately, like you have to have that conversation with your mother or your father or whatever. But, I have 4 children. And we've had the conversations because we don't know how life is going to be.
Absolutely.
And it's not easy, but I also think too, I always laugh because my sister, the oldest one's always like, I'm the oldest one. I have to deal with everything. And I'm like, that's not necessarily the truth either. You can really choose whom you want to have these conversations with. And
Absolutely.
Again, everyone just assumes you have to have it with your oldest child or whatever.
Right.
No, like, who do you feel comfortable? Ask the person, are we going to be comfortable having this conversation?
Right.
If you're not, okay, thank you for your honesty.
Right. One option you could think about is talking to your financial advisor. So your financial advisor should be having these conversations. And sometimes, family is complicated. It can be hard to talk to family. Sometimes you can say to your financial advisor, I want to make a plan. How do you suggest we start? Because they are ensuring that you have wealth for your retirement, and that's part of it. And as people think about what their plan is, as a solo ager myself, my plan is going to be to go to a continuing care retirement community like a Riverwoods. Those are places where you go in as an independent adult, you make friends, you get involved in the community. There's a lot of opportunity for socialization. And as you age, if you need more care, it's available to you right within the community. So I like that kind of one size fits all. Like I'm going to do that. And so whatever happens, I know my health care is covered. That's an easy conversation, but it's a conversation you could have with your financial advisor. Say, is this plan something I can afford? Or if my plan is to stay home and bring in care, everybody wants to stay home. We know that. But if your plan is to stay home, you will likely need long-term care at some point. We know 60% of people over 65 are going to need some form of long-term care.
Wow.
That is not generally covered by Medicare unless you have a 3-night qualifying stay in the hospital, and then they cover 100 days. So you should be planning for how you're going to cover that care with your own finances. So if that's staying at home and then going to assisted living or nursing care, don't believe it's not going to happen to you, because
it will.
It's better to plan ahead and then not have to need it than not plan for it, think you're going to be that 30% or 40% that are not going to need it.
Right.
So make a plan.
Well, the other thing too is like, at what age can you get accepted into like a Riverwoods?
So at Riverwoods, we are a continuing care retirement community, nonprofit. We have 3 locations: Exeter, Manchester, and Durham. You have to be at least 62 to join the wait list.
Okay.
The other thing I would tell your listeners is that when I started in this industry, you could walk in off the street and move into Riverwoods. It was not an issue. But now, because of this demographic boom, you can't do that. So I would say research now in your 60s, 70s. Think about it before you need it.
Right.
Because there are longer wait lists and you can't just walk in off the street.
Well, and I think too, people don't, like I keep telling this to my dad, like he's very social, he's got a bridge club and all this. And I was like, Dad, but going to these places, they have entertainment, they have social groups, you have breakfast, lunch, and dinner if you want it. Right. And like, he's like, oh, but they're so expensive. I'm like, but you got the money.
Yeah, I know.
Don't just do it. Like, give us peace of mind because, he lives in Montreal, so he doesn't do snow removal anymore or cut the grass or whatever. But these are things you worry about. And I'm like, you should be having the time of your life right now. You can have these social events planned for you. If you don't want to go, you don't go. I mean, I don't know. Right. I'm almost 60, and I'm telling you, it sounds really lovely.
I know. And the more 60-year-olds that come to Riverwoods with their parents are like, I love this.
This idea.
You know what I would love to change? I would love to change the assumption that we all have that living at home in your house alone equals independence.
Right.
That really isn't independence.
Right.
You got someone shoveling, plowing, doing the lawn, cleaning the gutters. You may have a housekeeper. Independence can be choosing a community. And there, you have a lot of opportunity. You don't have to drive at night. You got activities at night. You have access to a lot of friends. And you're independent. You're making this decision on your own, especially with a CCRC. The one thing that's different about Riverwoods as a CCRC is you have to be independent to move in.
Okay.
We are an insurance product. We don't look like it. We look like this beautiful, like over 55 condo community, but we are an insurance product. So that means to be accepted at Riverwoods, you have to be able to live safely on your own.
Okay.
So if you need assisted living, memory support, or nursing care, you can apply. Okay. So do it before it's too late.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting, to kind of think where you could get into a place, say, like you said, 65 kind of thing, get on a wait list or whatever, and then know that you don't have to make a move again.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's the other
thing. To me,
thing.
that's like such a peace of mind. And for your family as well.
Yeah.
I would think.
And I think our parents' generation, it's very much about the home. This is my home. But for boomers, we have bought and sold homes, we've flipped homes, we've moved for jobs. I think we're a little more fluid, and I think I have hope for our generation that we are open to new ways of defining independence.
Right. One of the things I wanted to talk about actually too was, a little bit about solo aging. And one of the guests you had on one of your podcasts was Carol Marek.
Yes.
And she was amazing. And it was so interesting to me because I say this to a lot of people all the time is that, you need to stay healthy. You need to try to be active, join a gym, do hand weights, whatever, just you got to keep moving, right?
Yes.
And I loved it because her first comment to you out the gate was like, I went for a physical. I got my health in order. Can you expand on that? The importance,
Yes.
And people need to understand that because if you're not healthy,
oh my gosh, I am telling you that, everyone asks about the secret to aging and I actually have it.
Oh,
because all the experts, I have recorded 40 episodes so far in a little over a year. I have 50 in the can and everyone agrees sleep, exercise, and socialization are the key to aging. Sleep, because that's where our brain gets restored, everything gets knitted back together. Exercise, because as you said, you have to keep moving. Exercise helps your heart, your lungs, your joints. It's annoying and it's not natural to a lot of people, myself included, but you have to do it. And socialization is more important for your brain than brain games. When you have a conversation with someone and you are reading facial cues and you are responding to a conversation where you don't know where it's going, it lights up those areas of the brain that we need to keep our plasticity going. The brain games just teach you how to get better at the brain games. So the neurologists that I have talked to and interviewed have said it's the socialization that is the key to this. So, but of the very, very first, I would say exercise, I would say moving. We are such a sedentary society that it is easy to sit back. There's so much coming at us. There's so much screen opportunity. You really have to push yourself out of your comfort zone, because the more you move and the more you use your body and stay healthy, we all want to live long and die short.
Right.
We don't want to live short and have a long, painful death.
Right.
The healthier you are at later ages, the better it is for you.
Right, right. Yeah, no, I think that, like I said, I was just kind of blown away that she had just kind of, targeted that. I have a good friend who's a mobility coach, and her husband keeps saying, we need to get out of this house with stairs. And she says, absolutely not. We are doing stairs until we're 90 years old.
I know,
And
exactly.
it's like, people just don't think like that. And I think we've learned, unfortunately, the hard way, I think, through COVID, how busy and important socializing was.
Yeah.
Because we've seen the numbers. They're not pretty. People were very sad and depressed, and it's just unfortunate. So I think socializing is a big key. And again, your Riverwoods and places like that offer that sort of, service to people that is important.
Yeah, they make it easier. It gets harder as we get older. We lose friends. Friends move away. And it gets harder to remain social. We stop driving at night. And so it's more of an effort, and it's really important to continue doing the difficult things for your own health. And another thing I would love to mention is a researcher that I am just obsessed with, Becca Levy, who's at Yale, who wrote a book called Breaking the Age Code. And she did research that demonstrates that if you have a positive attitude about aging, about yourself, you will live longer, 7.5 years longer, and spend less money on healthcare than somebody who has a negative attitude. So all of us, all of your listeners, have these built-in assumptions where, oh, I'm so old, or I'm so wrinkled, or I don't look as good. Change that.
Yeah.
Change your internal monologue and change the monologue of people around you, and be grateful for who you are, where you are, because it makes a difference.
Right, right. I think that's so true. I think so many of my girlfriends and stuff, we're always checking in on, don't be so hard on yourself. Stop, don't talk to yourself like that, and
women are the worst.
We're the worst. We're the absolute worst. And it's like, you know what? Just be grateful that, when you were 20, you were miserable.
Yeah, I know.
Right? Like everyone kind of says, what age would you go back? And to be honest, I don't know if I found it yet. I kind of just enjoy a lot of everything, sort of thing. But, moving forward too, I'm like everybody else. You sort of go, did we, provide it, like financially, are we going to be okay? Because we just don't know. And it is scary. You know, it's very scary. Another one that I think is a really interesting point that people don't think about is transportation when you're older and how you could get around and things. Can you, does Riverwoods, for example, have,
I think that's one of the great things about Riverwoods. As we all, get older, our eyesight goes, and my eyesight is shot to begin with.
Oh, yeah. I'm with you.
We offer a lot of events and activities at night on campus, so you don't have to go anywhere. We offer transportation to doctor's appointments, shopping, grocery store, and any kind of weather. So even if it's just nasty out and you're like, I don't want to get in my car and do that, you can have access all of our services going forward as boomers, as we get bigger in terms of numbers, the workforce is getting smaller. There's an inverted triangle of people born that are still going to be in the workforce. So just not that many people anymore. So in the 1950s, we had 7 people for every retiree. It's dropped so that in 2011, it was 4 people for every retiree. In 2050, it's going to be 2 people in the workforce. That's 2 people in the entire workforce. That means tech, that means arts, that means teachers. It doesn't mean people who choose this super sexy long-term care field. So it's going to look different. It's going to look different for us, and we need to plan ahead. And I'm telling you, self-driving cars have not come fast enough for me.
Well, I think also, I don't know if there's enough people planning to make those communities and those things that we're going to need. And I think that, we need to really kind of figure that out real soon.
we have that opportunity. As boomers, we have to do it, and we have to do it now. And as I said earlier, our parents didn't expect to live this long. We know. So God forbid we don't make a plan.
Right. We should
when
know.
we have the opportunity.
Well, that's it. I think we should learn from that. And move forward. So, well, we're almost out of time, but if someone wants to watch your Seniority Authority, which I highly recommend, it's a wonderful, wonderful podcast with so many great guests, and the information is amazing on that.
Thank you.
Where would they find it?
So, Seniority Authority is a free podcast available on every platform, Audible, iTunes, anywhere you listen to podcasts, you can download it. You can also go to our website, seniorityauthority.org, because we're a nonprofit, and stream it from there. I'm also on TikTok and Facebook and Instagram as well.
Awesome. And what's the next one coming up? What's the next podcast?
The next one coming up, I have a great one with Sarah Zeff-Geber, and she is an authority on solo aging. So if you want to hear more about it, she's written the book on solo aging. She's got a lot of great tips. So
is she a solo ager herself, or is she just sort of
She is not a solo ager, but she has advised many solo agers.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today. I really appreciate meeting you and you taking the time to come talk to us. It's been great.
Been a delight. Thank you so much. I loved doing this.
Thank you. That's all the time we have for Guided Crossings. I'm Andrea Sebastyan. We'll see you next time.
The subject of death and dying can be a very difficult conversation to have. Many of us avoid having the conversation because it makes us uncomfortable. We don't want to worry or upset our loved ones, and we really don't want to face tough questions or think about our own death. Having open conversations about death and dying allows us to prepare ourselves and our loved ones on how we would like to create our own end-of-life journey. On every episode of Guided Crossings, we will explore a different part of the dying process and offer suggestions on how to prepare your loved ones as well as yourself. I'm your host, Andrea Sebastyan, and this is Guided Crossings.